I like to think we have a lot more than a homestead here. We have a family, we have a community, getting engaged with people in my town, sharing the food that I'm producing with them. It's just a really joyous experience, and I'm so happy to share it with you today as we walk through my garden. Hi, I'm Alexa and welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to take you on the first garden tour of 2022. I've been gardening since 2015, where I started in a very small raised bed. At the time I was living on a 10-acre property and I had a lot of opportunities to grow a very large garden. However, I was kind of timid and I had two really young kids and I just didn't know what I was doing. But having that garden allowed me to learn how some things grow. I had never planted any kind of seeds before, and that year I remember growing carrots and kale, cucumbers, and I had everything planted so close together, and I didn't realize how big plants actually get when they start to grow. I learned a lot that year, and after that point, once we got our property that we live on now and have been here since 2016, I've had a garden each season, and each season I learned something new, I expand my garden a little bit more, and I just love doing it. So I started sharing on YouTube my gardening journey in 2020. I had been laid off from my job at that time because of the coronavirus pandemic, and I had some free time, so I picked up my camera and started to document how I was getting ready for the 2020 gardening season. And in that year, I expanded my garden, started to turn it into not just a place where I grow food, but a place that is beautiful, a place of serenity, a place that I can just come and be in peace. I like to think we have a lot more than a homestead here. We have a family, we have a community, and getting engaged with people in my town, sharing the food that I'm producing with them. It's just a really joyous experience, and I'm so happy to share it with you today as we walk through my garden. Me and my chickens here are living in Northeast Ohio. We're right near Lake Erie, and so we get some really crazy winters. We do experience that joyous lake effect snow. So now that we're in June and gardening season has begun, I'm really excited to be outside, to be enjoying the warm weather and seeing things start to grow. Now, my garden is not perfect. It's not pristine and camera ready at all angles. A lot of it is very nice and we work very hard to make it that way. However, I got hoses laying around, I've got tools laying around, because really, and the truth of it is, whenever I get a spare chance to come out here, I do. So I'm not always cleaning up after myself. And I'm really trying to make it accessible so I can pick up a tool, work on a project whenever my schedule allows. I do work full-time, and gardening is not my main priority. Neither is making videos. However, I love to do both, and so whenever I'm able to share it, I'm gonna try my best to get it out there for you. So I'm gonna take you to the front of the garden here and kind of do a pan of the overall garden, talk about it, and show you what I have got growing in here. So when we walk in the garden here, we're right underneath the main pathway with the cattle panel arches. Right now I've got peas growing up on those. Over to the left, I've got several different garden spaces that we've constructed this year. And over to the right, I've got some hoop houses with tulle netting on it for my brassicas, and tomato alley behind. And just outside the garden there is my greenhouse, where I've got lots of plant starts sitting out front there, and I'm going to be selling them at the farmer's market next week. So I'm going to start with the beds over to the left side of the garden. It looks pretty bare in here right now because I just got some seeds planted within the week. You can see all that beautiful grain in there. Those are all zinnia seeds. So this is going to be a really lovely row of zinnia flowers. I also have planted some different varieties of squash all in here. I believe it's patty pan squash, so we'll have some really nice bushes of squash all along these edges. I really wanted to make sure I leave some space in between these different rows for different crops that I want to start later on in the season. My husband and his good friend Jay are here doing some building projects, so there is some background noise that you may hear. And like I said, today's the day where I have time, so I'm going to pick up the camera and give this garden tour, whether or not we've got drills and air compressors going on in the background. So just so you're aware, that's what those sounds are coming from. So this cattle panel arch right here is new this year. We just put that up a couple days ago. My mom and I did that together, and she painted one of my birdhouse gourds. In 2020 I had really gorgeous birdhouse gourd plant, and I got lots of gourds off of it, and they've been sitting over there inside my barn for the last few years, and she graciously took them, cleaned them up, and started painting them for me. You can see a bunch of them over there too. Down here I've got 3 jelly melon plants, so those are definitely new. I've never had those before. I saw them from MI Gardener, so I did really want to give those a try. Oh. That's weed. And then on the other side I have some lemon cucumbers, so looking forward to those. This is one of a volunteer kale plant. It actually grew back from last year. That was fun. I always love volunteer plants. Makes it easier for me. Same with all these cilantro plants. I had a huge patch of cilantro sprout right in this area, and I transplanted a bunch of it. Very excited. I keep pinching it back because it's trying to go to seed. Cilantro doesn't last very long in the heat. And then down the middle of this bed, you can't really tell, but I have sweet potato vines planted, and I have those planted in various locations. I envision these beds having a really nice sweet potato vine or sweet potato leaf as a ground cover to smother out any weeds that might come through. Sweet potatoes, if you've never grown them, are super pretty. The foliage is really nice, and they have beautiful white purple flowers. It has been a lot of work this spring trying to get all of these new garden beds put together. Since I expanded my garden in 2020, I've not stuck with the same kind of layout. I've been moving my crops around every year. I do in-ground gardening, so I have some flexibility with that, not having dedicated raised beds. But this year I wanted to try something different, and it started with the circle garden, which I'll show you next. I've had a lot of bricks laying around, and the bricks I've been moving around for years too, and just setting them up in different positions. And I had this idea to make a circular garden bed. And when I made the circular garden bed, I really liked the way that the bricks looked. It looked very fairy garden-esque. I had the desire to make more garden beds using bricks. And so luckily a good friend of mine recommended a place locally that was having a clearance sale on bricks. So I was able to get 500 bricks for a really good price, and have spent a lot of time reshaping all of the garden beds that we're walking through today, laying out the bricks. I'm so thankful for my sons and my mom, Susan, who helped me with all of the brick moving activities. And I'm really pleased with how it's all turned out, and I am happy with it enough to leave the bricks and these beds as they are for at least several years to come. I'm tired of relaying out my garden, and I think I need a break from that for a while, so I can focus more time on actually planting things than figuring out where they're gonna go. I'm gonna turn this camera around and I will show you my favorite part of the garden. So right here is my circle garden. I have this beautiful obelisk right in the middle. Found that at a yard sale down the street last summer. And so I have peas that are planted down towards the bottom. They're slowly growing, with the vision that they will crawl and climb up and cover the obelisk. And then behind that, I just recently planted some morning glories, which will be really pretty once those bloom on there. So in this bed I have a variety of different brassicas and greens. Got curly dwarf kale, rutabagas, kohlrabi, purple kohlrabi, Hilton Chinese cabbage, The slugs do a good job of making holes in there. Got Swiss chard. I have onions interplanted throughout the entire thing. Purple cabbage. Mustard greens all around the inner circle here, and I just cut those back a few days ago because those were all trying to go to seed. You can see the peas. They've been struggling a bit. We've had a hot and cold spring. It gets really hot and then it gets cold and then really hot and cold, so they're struggling a little bit. I'm not sure if we'll get many peas this year. Lacinato kale. I had some purple lady bok choy here. Again, this has went to seed. I haven't had much luck with the purple lady or any bok choy of that matter in the springtime. It just gets too hot too fast. And then the patterns kind of continue around the entire circle. But I interplanted all of these really closely. Vegetables, different kind of plants are close together. They smother out any weeds that would try and grow. So if we kind of dig down in here, there's really not many weeds coming up underneath. I do have it mulched with wood chips, but even still, everything planted really closely has been working out good. As well as this volunteer potato plant that I left and just planted the brassicas around it. My circle garden is my favorite part of the garden right now, and as long as the greens keep producing as they are, it's going to remain my favorite. I just love how it looks. It looks like something that belongs in a fairy tale or a cottage garden or in a storybook. And it has really made growing greens very enjoyable for me. So we'll see how this spring and early summer go. Temperatures are going to raise next week again into the upper 80s, so I do anticipate a lot of this going to seed, but I'll take what I can get. And then coming through the pathway into the next garden bed, I have a much larger space here, and along this entire back row are different varieties of sunflowers. This one here is exciting. This is the Van Gogh Fantasy Mix from Sunflower Steve. If you haven't heard of Sunflower Steve, you need to go check him out on Instagram. He has the most beautiful sunflowers, and he started selling some of the seeds earlier this year on a limited offer. And then next year they'll be more available, but these are gonna be amazing sunflowers like you've never seen before. And then all down the other side are just your more traditional, giant, big sunflowers. And then in front of the sunflowers on this entire row are different flowers. I just sowed the seeds about 4 days ago, and we've had quite a bit of rain this week. So you can see all those tiny seedlings starting to come up. And when I say different varieties of flowers, I mean a lot of different varieties. I don't even remember all of the ones I put in. But whatever I had in my seed collection, I just took all of the flower seed packets that had been opened and just had a little bit of, seeds left in them. And I sprinkled them all down. I know there were like carnations, larkspur, foxglove, daisy, zinnia, marigold, like cosmos. There were a bunch of different kinds. Space here is going to be just filled with color and really beautiful flowers, and I am so excited for it. So the rest of this area here does look pretty bare right now. I do have some sweet potato vines planted along this line here. You can't see them. I'm hopeful that they'll make a recovery. I planted them a little bit too late. They were starting to get mushy, so I'm hoping they make a comeback, and then this area will be covered in sweet potato vine. And I do have some different varieties of squashes that I've planted the seeds for. They just haven't sprouted yet. Another volunteer potato plant. And then also in this area, I'm not in a super rush to plant it. I'm thinking I'm gonna do some carrots and beets and radishes and different types of root crops that will be able to grow really well underneath the sweet potato vine. So I'm kind of letting those get a head start before I try and put any other seeds in this space. and just kind of give myself a break. And then coming to this side, I have a couple different varieties of bush beans planted in here. I know I have some Blue Lake bush beans. Oh gosh, I can't remember the others. Once they get a little bit bigger, I will check them out. And then some more cucumber plants. I'll have to thin those once those start to get a little bit bigger. This whole side of the garden, my main goal was just to make a lot of curves and use different shapes. So I have my circles, I've got my half moon. My brother-in-law said it kind of looks like a putt-putt golf course, which I can't disagree with. The different shapes and such I have, it does kind of look like that, but I like it. I think it's quirky and fun. So I'm very excited how my lettuce has been turned out this spring. I mean, look how gorgeous this is. I love seeing lettuce planted with different colors in between the greens. So I have a green, a red, and a green, and it is just so pretty. This is the bronze leaf lettuce in the first row. The next row is called La Rosa. And then the last row is bib lettuce. And then next to the carrots, you can see two dark lines, and that's where I just sowed imperator carrots. And those have not germinated yet, but we will have carrots down the line there. And since we're here at this trellis crossing, I'll talk about what I have planted. I have loofah gourd planted on this trellis. Now, these loofah gourd plants don't look super good. I actually started them in February, so they have had time to grow. However, I left them in their pots a little bit too long. They were starting to suffer and they were getting dried out. So we'll see what happens. I have one on this side too. I'm not sure if they are gonna grow. They haven't really done much in the week and a half that they've been out here. But I'm gonna give them a chance and see what happens. Loofah gourd, when they grow well, they take over a space. So I envision this trellis here to be completely covered with foliage, and that's what I'm hoping for. So fingers crossed that the loofah make a comeback. So next we're gonna talk about my garden greenhouse and my special guest, the garden guardian. So this was the greenhouse that I kept my chickens in over winter. We moved the chickens out in April, got the greenhouse kind of cleaned up, and in here I have peppers and tomato plants. But let's take a moment to talk about him. So this is my garden guardian, my guardian. And a couple years ago, our local JCPenney store closed and they were trying to sell everything, including mannequins. So, and my sister, she got a couple mannequins and she gave me one of them. And this is the mannequin. Now, originally he was not painted blue or have these nice shorts on, but I asked my mom to paint him because she is a great artist, and she came up with this. This is an outdoor paint, and I just love it. I think it's so quirky and weird, but it's also kind of cool. So it adds a really nice pop of color and uniqueness to the garden space. And so where he's located right now is right in front of my greenhouse. And so let's go talk about what's growing in here. So as you can imagine, my chickens were in here through the winter. Lots of manure, it decomposed, and I've got some pretty amazing looking plants. So right at the beginning, I've got Trip L crop tomatoes, and they're just starting to set flower. Banana peppers, all looking really nice. Lemon spice jalapenos, big mama tomatoes. Those are a new paste tomato that I'm trying this year. A mortgage lifter looking so lovely. I have some shishito peppers in here. You can see they're really tiny. Some of my pepper plants have been struggling this year. Some are really, really nice, and some are struggling. And I don't really know why, because they've all been planted in the same conditions, the same soil mix. I did have a bit of a hard time getting some of my seedlings separated and transplanted into larger pots when it was time to up-pot them. So I think some of my kind of stunted plants are a result of that. I just waited too long to up-pot them. Those shishito peppers do have some new growth on them. So I'm hoping that they're starting to grow finally. They've been planted in this greenhouse now. I think it's been like 3 or 4 weeks, so they should be growing at this point. It's just taking them a little bit longer, but I do have a lot of other pepper plants that are looking nice. And then on the other side, I've got Castelluto Genovese tomatoes, Jersey Devil tomato. I have the peppers in the front and tomatoes in the back. These are Carmen Italian peppers. My husband's name is Carmen, so I had to grow those again. And those are all looking really good. Orange bell peppers. A couple dragon chili peppers. I don't like anything that spicy, but I put them in because Carmen does like more spicy things. Dr. Weiss's tomato. And a couple of my Hungarian hearts that are taking a while to grow. So I do have 2 of them here. If one of them decides to take off, then I'll leave that one and trim the other. So it's my plan to put up some kind of piping, probably just a PVC pipe, towards this line right here, so I can string tie my tomatoes. They're so far at an okay height where they're not falling over, but probably in the next week or 2 they're gonna need some kind of support. So I'm gonna ask Carmen to help me get some kind of piping put across so I can get some strings ran down and string tie trellis my tomatoes. I did that method last year. It really worked well. It was very easy, easy to put up, easy to take down, and easy just to maintain that. I do have a video of the rebar method that I use for string tying my tomatoes. I'll put a link on that if you are interested in checking that out. And the last thing about this greenhouse is I do have a soaker hose along the row of each plant. I only have had to use it like 2 or 3 times. This area is pretty heavily mulched because of all of the bedding from the chickens that were in here, and the ground underneath the top layer is very moist. So these plants have been thriving just on the soil underneath the mulch, which has been really cool. I haven't grown in any type of greenhouse through the main gardening season before, so this is something new to me. It's an experiment. Learning from it, learning what works, what's not gonna work. And so far I'm pleased with what I'm finding, and you know, potentially we can use this on the off season. However, I'm not sure yet because this did really work really well for my chickens and I probably want to use that again for them, but I'm enjoying it so far. And then just to the side of this greenhouse is where I planted Kennebec potatoes. So I just got these 3 rows done yesterday. And I still have a bunch of red potatoes, and I'm going to somehow plant them in this space here. I got it kind of dug up and tilled up so I can get the potatoes in this week. I'm gonna leave this pathway right here, but I'm gonna fill in the sides with the red potatoes. And then I'm also really trying to maximize my space. Now I do have a pretty large yard. Lots of green space, as you can see there, even into the back. I have a good amount of space where I could potentially grow a lot of food. However, at this time my water source comes from my house, so I only want to haul my hose so far. And honestly, maintaining the garden that I have now has been a little bit challenging with my work schedule and the extracurriculars I do outside of work, and then taking care of my family. So expanding into more of the yard space just isn't going to be feasible for me at this time. Even though I have a very large garden, I would love to plant more for more production. But all that being said, I've been looking into interplanting, what kind of crops go well together where they can go more vertical crops, and then what can be a good crop to companion plant with that goes in ground, like a root crop. I just read yesterday as I was planting the potatoes, if I can plant corn with the potatoes. And the couple articles I read online said that it's actually a really good method to plant your potatoes and corn together. So once my potatoes start to sprout, I will come in behind that and put in my corn seeds, kind of spacing them out to be like every other after the potato sprouts. Corn roots are pretty shallow, they don't go down very deep, and the potatoes obviously are going into the ground, so the corn's going to grow up, the potatoes are going to grow down, and I think it's going to be a really nice mix. So it'll be something new that I'm trying, but it's one way that I'm able to plant some crops that do require a lot of space. Corn does take up a lot of space. Growing your potatoes, if you want to store them through the winter, which is what we want to do, that takes up space. So kind of putting them together, I am hoping works out for our benefit. And then all along here, all of this greenery here, those are my red raspberries. Those are starting to bud now and get little berries on them. And then I've got 3 black raspberry plants. I just moved them back here. They used to be intertwined with all of that. And then earlier this spring, I moved them so they were more separated and could spread out in this area. I'm very excited to see the little buds coming out. We'll start to see all of these berries ready for harvest in early July. And then you may be wondering, what is all going on over here? Let me show you. So I do have to say I get a lot of my gardening talents from my mother, Susan. She has been a gardener her whole life, and I've always grown up around very beautiful landscaped yards. Her big thing has always been more ornamental flowers, trees, shrubbery, and her landscaping. Whereas my thing has been a lot more of growing food, but kind of merging those two things together. I take a lot of her inspiration and put it into my garden, and she has taken my inspiration of growing food in a very beautiful manner into her garden. So she is growing a garden here at my property this year. She lives in a neighborhood where there are a lot of trees, kind of more in a city space, and it's very difficult for her to grow food there. And so she asked if she could have a garden space at my house because we do have very nice soil. It's a sandy loam. I was like, sure, you know, as long as you can maintain it, because I can't. And she has been working really hard on this space and just got a lot of things planted in the last week as well. And I will take you through there once everything kind of comes up a little bit more. There's more to see, but isn't it just a really lovely, beautiful space? She's very talented. And maybe that gives you an idea, if you do have a little bit of extra land on your property that someone in your family or a close friend may want to kind of farm or garden on, you know, I would encourage you to consider it, as long as they are obviously someone you can trust and you know that they will take care of whatever they do. It's a really great way to kind of share with others. And her gardening over there is cutting down our lawn mowing time, which is really nice. Every year as we expand in different areas, our lawn mowing time is being cut down. We still have a lot of lawn left, but it has come quite down in the last few years. All right, back to my garden. So now we're at the back half of the garden, and we are going to talk about the garlic. So there is, I believe, 300 garlic plants in here. Last year I grew 100, and then I saved half of all of the cloves from last year's harvest, and I replanted those on Halloween, October 31st. And what is today? Today's June 12th, so I have about one more month before this garlic will be ready for harvest. And the garlic scapes just started to appear in the last couple days, so I do need to get out here and start cutting these. But you can see they are on pretty much every single plant. So if you don't know what a garlic scape is, it is essentially what would become the flower stalk of a garlic plant. If you've grown onions in the past, you may have seen that it would put out a bloom, and that flower would make onion seeds that you would use to plant more onion. Well, the same is true for garlic. The garlics will send up a center stalk, and they get kind of curly when they come out. And if I didn't do anything, this would eventually turn into a flower, which would make garlic seeds, and you could plant those to make garlic plants. When you do grow garlic from actual garlic seeds, it does take a couple years for them to be ready for harvest as the garlic we eat them. But when we leave these behind and let them go to flower, the plant is putting all of its energy into making a flower and seeds, so it's reproducing, and that energy is not going back into the actual garlic bulb in the ground. So when we see these, we need to cut them off so that way the plant's energy can be focused on growing a bigger bulb, because that's what we want to harvest, is those bigger bulbs. Now when we cut the garlic scapes off, we can eat them. They taste very similar to garlic. They're very tender, easy to chew. Ooh. It's got a little spiciness to it. What I did with a lot of my garlic scapes last year was I dehydrated them and turned it into a powder. And I have been using that in my cooking all year long. My little bottle is about this big, and it's just about empty, so that lasted me an entire year. You can also like saute these, roast them, cut them up, put them in soups. Really, you can use them in any way that you would use garlic. So when you grow garlic, you kind of get two crops for one. You get the garlic scapes, and then about a month or so later, you can get your actual garlic bulbs. So more to come on the garlic. If you're interested in a video learning more about garlic scapes and what kind of varieties of garlic we're doing this year, let me know, and I can work on that. And then over here is a newer strawberry patch. I've got 4 different kinds of strawberries. 2 are ever-bearing, all-year strawberries, and 2 are June-bearing. And the grass has grown up quite a bit in here. It grew before I could get it mulched. I did get some of it weeded, but it's still a bit of a mess. However, we are getting strawberries. Look how lovely this berry. This is the Albion ever-bearing strawberry, and they are so big. I've read a lot about you're not supposed to let your first year strawberry plants bear fruit and like pinch the flowers off. I didn't do that. I let them flower, and I have let them make fruit, and they are really big fruits, and the plants look good. So, oh, it's so good. These are so much better than the other kinds of strawberries that I've had for a few years. So maybe I'm breaking the rules a little bit by harvesting my strawberries the first year they're in this spot, but I don't care because they're delicious. So on this trellis, I have a beautiful rose called an Eden climbing rose, and I've got several volunteer sunflowers. I mean, this one's getting really big already. Look at that. This is the Eden climbing rose. There's a crazy amount of buds on here. I have one on the other side as well. So we put this rose plant in 2020, and it was very small. It was 2021. it almost filled the trellis. It got about halfway up on either side of the trellis. And so I was really looking forward to this year, this rose bush being over the entire trellis, and I could walk through it and it would be magical and beautiful and great. Well, luckily our very cold winter killed off half of the growth. So all of the vines that were on the arch itself, they all died. I was super disappointed. I left them as long as I could. I actually think we cut this back maybe like a week or two ago because I was like really waiting to see if they were going to make it, and they were clearly dead. So I had to cut the loss, and now my climbing rose is back down pretty low to the ground. So I will not have a full trellis this year. I am disappointed about it. And I have learned that this rose is a little bit more sensitive to the cold. I am really happy that the entire plant didn't die. But now I know that this is something that I'm gonna have to cover through the winter to protect any growth that's going up over the trellis. We have some nice chives here. They're starting to dry out now. I cut back a lot of this and dehydrated all of my chive blossoms. You gotta have your table and chairs in your garden. We found this down the street for $100, this entire set, and it's in like super good shape. I was really excited to find that. And then my mom has made these really awesome garden posts. They have a solar light on top. But they have different verses on each side. She called them peace poles, so they're different verses about peace. And I have a couple of them throughout the garden in here. So now we have come to Tomato Alley. So this is where most of my tomato plants are located. And then right in front in each of these little brick beds, I have different pepper varieties. I'm growing 22 different tomato varieties for 2022. I didn't plan that, it just worked out that way. And I talk about all those varieties in another video. I'll link that if you're interested. But I am really happy with how these tomato plants are starting to grow. Like I said earlier, we had a lot of rain this week, and that's just what they needed to kind of get them going. Very excited about this tomato. My friend Ashley gifted me this start. It is the giant crimson tomato. If you follow M.I. Gardener, there were 80-year-old tomato seeds that he got a hold of and was able to germinate them and has been making them stable and started selling them recently. And this is one of those plants. So I'm very excited about trying this super old variety of tomato and saving the seeds. And then down here I've got red sun peppers, mini cherry peppers, jalapenos, lemon jalapenos, shishitos, kind of a mix of everything. And I believe I planted radishes down the middle. This one I've got corbachi peppers, amaranth, more banana peppers, bequino yellow peppers, habanadas. Now this bed I believe are the beets. These look more like beet seedlings. I think that's a kohlrabi, more amaranth. I've just been putting random stuff in where there's bare spots. Same thing with over here. I believe that might be a broccoli plant, a kohlrabi or collard. I had a lot of brassica seedlings that just needed a home, so I've just been putting them wherever. And then the spinach. This is a rogue rhubarb plant. I have never eaten anything off of this plant. I put it in last year, it grew. This year it keeps trying to go to seed. I have plucked the flowers off several times and they keep putting up new ones. I never got any nice red rhubarb stalk, so I kind of just left the flowers and I'm letting it go to seed. I don't really know what to do with rhubarb. I hear people making rhubarb pies. I'm not really a pie person, so I don't really know what else to do with it. At this point, it is just decoration. But in the rest of this bed, I have put in some different kind of squashes. I think I have some zucchini in here, and I believe it's some kind of squash. I took a picture of it on my phone. And I put more carrots along this edge here, or radishes, carrots or radishes. Again, just trying to fill in, like wherever I have something big growing, putting some kind of root crop that'll be underneath of it. The squashes are gonna kind of shade any, root crop that likes cooler weather. And it's just a good use of space because a lot of leaves are going to cover this area, but I can still get food underneath of them. And so the next couple raised beds I have here, this is asparagus all in here. I've been picking on these pretty regularly since May, and I have let some go to seed, the ones that are more skinny. So when you see that your asparagus starts to get kind of on the skinnier side, that's when you want to start letting it go to seed. I have some good ones over here that I could probably harvest right now. There's a big one coming up. And then I have wild strawberry plants just kind of interplanted in here just to cover and fill it in a little bit, help with the weeds, although the clover is coming up. Looks like I also have some dill there. And I put in tromboncino squash. I had this kind of squash growing on my trellis last year. I really liked it. It felt very fun and funky. So those are just starting to come up. I will thin those out when appropriate. We have had a mama robin nesting in this birdhouse. And a baby was born just a few days ago. There were 3 blue eggs in here. I don't know if there's one underneath still, but there is at least one baby. Mama robin flies off every time I walk by. I leave her alone, but she has not gotten used to me. But it's been really cool that we have a mama bird nesting in the garden this year. And Lucas is really excited about it, my son, because he painted this birdhouse and helped build it with my mom, his grandma. And a beautiful little birdie took up residence. So this bed, I have some onions that I missed when I harvested them last year, so they're coming back up and trying to set flower. That's what these buds are. They will eventually turn into a flower. And I put in some more just various squashes. Okay. Yeah, I put butternut squash in this bed, so again, I imagine it will take up quite a lot of space. But over here, I have more beets planted. Those are what beet seedlings look like. So ideally, when the butternut squash takes over this bed, I will still have beets growing their roots underneath here. And then the peas on the trellis are on this trellis and this one. These are both a variety called telephone peas or telephone pole peas. And really by now they should have been fully grown and setting pea pods, but this weather, they've been struggling a little bit in the weather that we've been having. But looks like we got a flower on this one. The telephone pole peas are supposed to get like 6 feet tall, so I put them here envisioning that they will pretty much cover the trellis. However, I am not sure that they're gonna make it that far. I think the heat's gonna get them before they get too big. So to prepare, I did go ahead and plant some pole beans underneath, and you can see them right there. They're starting to come up, the pole beans. So while my peas aren't necessarily needing to come out at this time, I'm getting prepared because, I mean, we are almost in mid-June. The peas are not going to really make it very well in July. So I've got the beans coming up right behind them, so as soon as those peas do need to come out, I've kind of got something already started and ready to take over, because one of my favorite things about the garden is when these trellises are full of foliage, and they are tunnels of foliage that you can just walk under, and it's just very special. So now we're going to talk about what is growing underneath these little hoop houses. So this netting is actually made out of tulle, just like that fabric that you would use for tutus. And I found a couple different ones that had a shiny stamp to them, which I really liked and looked for on purpose, because if you can tell, like, there's really not much sun out today. It's kind of overcast and it just sparkles in the light. And at night I have my Christmas lights strung on my fence, and so that reflects on these too, and so at nighttime they just kind of twinkle, and it's really pretty, and just a simple way to kind of add some character and beauty into the garden. But each of these are on a hinge, and so they can open up, but I keep the netting on because, so these are brassicas that I'm trying to protect from bugs. So cabbage moths, they lay their larvae on any kind of brassica plant, and then the little wormies pretty much destroy everything. So this is my way to help prevent that. Now this bed is pretty weedy, and a lot of what I put in here didn't seem to take. I got a lot of empty spots, so I'll probably put some more seedlings in here to fill this out. So in this one here, I have purple kohlrabi and white kohlrabi. So kohlrabi takes up quite a bit of space. Now this one here is super impressive to me. I don't know that I've ever grown greens that look like this since I've been gardening. And I think they look as good as they do because this tulle, it's on the darker side. It's like a black base, and then it's got these shiny heart stamps. And I think because it's a darker tulle, it's actually letting these brassicas grow better in this heat and the sun that we've been having, compared to this one was lime green, and this one's like a white base with a silver stamp. Because otherwise the growing conditions are the same in each of these different little hoop houses. But this one is fantastic. I did plant this one first, so they've been in there for a little bit longer than the other two beds, but I'm pretty excited to show you what's growing in here. Without even opening it, you can see it's just like overflowing. All right, take a look at this beauty. Everything is so big and beautiful, and for the most part blemish free. I do have some holes in here, so there probably is some slugs, I'm guessing, getting some of those cabbages. I got purple cabbage, the Hilton cabbage, rutabaga, and I believe collards. I think these are the collards. They're so big. But everything is looking so nice. Very minimal weeds coming through here. And I'm not especially watering them or anything like that. It's just been pretty much rainwater. So I am super pleased with how this entire bed looks. And no wormies eating my beautiful brassica. So a lot of this, like especially the cabbage here, the Chinese cabbage, I think will be ready to harvest pretty soon. These were my earlier spring crops getting put in, so these should be ready to go pretty soon. Now I've used different kind of insect netting in the past, some of the more traditional row cover stuff. The tulle actually is working, in my opinion, better for at least this time of year, and it was cheap. I found this tulle on clearance, so you know, I try not to pay full price. I try not to pay full price for anything if I can help it. So finding this was a good deal, and I am really enjoying using the tool, and it's pretty. If I can make any type of traditional farming or gardening stuff more pretty, I'm gonna do it. Because I just like to look at it and it makes it just look nicer. So in front here on the fence line, I've got weeds, but I've got some little pine trees in there. They were a class project that my kids brought home. So we just put them in the garden for now. I mean, they'll get moved eventually. This is not their permanent spot. But we just gave them a place to go. I don't remember what flower this is. I started these from seeds last year. I got no flowers from it, and now they're starting to bloom. Do you know what these are? I've got some goji berries that are ready to be planted in these pots. They're in there. I just need to prepare this ground. And then all of these pots here are what I grew in my greenhouse, this greenhouse, through the entire winter. So this is where they're at now in June. They have gone to seed. Collards and sprouting broccoli and rutabaga, a type of cabbage, Russian red kale, some purple cabbages. And my plan for these at this point is I have let them go to seed because I want to collect the seeds from them. So they flowered, they started like this and flowered, and now the flowers have turned into seed pods, which is what this is, a seed pod. So when this turns brown and dries out, the seeds will be ready to collect at that point. And it'll be a little bit of a task to get all the seeds out of these. I've done it before. Kind of just break them open into a big box. But I really like to try and save my own seeds where possible. It helps cut down on cost of gardening, and you can get a lot of seeds off of a couple plants. So I believe like this grow bag here has all rutabaga seeds in it, and I mean there's going to be hundreds upon hundreds of seeds that I get out of here. So here's another set of seed pods at a later stage. You can see they're starting to turn yellow at this point. So they're almost to the point where they will be brown, and once they are brown and dry, that's when they are ready for collection. So while they don't look super pretty, I've kept all of this kind of on the side of the garden because I thought, why not? It's better to have the seeds and be able to grow more food than not have them, and it's not like I needed these pots right away. So I just let it grow. And I mean, look at this thing. I was very impressed with how all those plants grew through the winter. I didn't heat my greenhouse, and I mean, we got below zero plenty of times, and nothing died. I had them covered with a frost fabric and plastic through the coldest part of our winter. And a lot of the plants just kind of like went dormant. They went to sleep, and then about March, when it started to warm up, the plant started to grow again. But because they had gone dormant, and then as soon as it got warm out, they pretty much immediately went to seed. So I didn't really get much of like a harvest where I got like a full, a full head of cabbage or a full head of broccoli or anything like that. I was eating mostly the sprouts that came off of the plant. When they were going to seed, they make little florets. They kind of all look like broccoli. Any kind of brassica plant looks like broccoli when it is first going to seed before the actual flowers come out. It sends up this stalk with like this little floret on top, and you can eat those. So that's what I pretty much use those plants for eating the florets off of them, and then eventually I just let them mature, and they're growing their seeds at this point, and I will save them. So the last section of the garden that I'm going to share with you today is right here behind me. I have another row of tomato plants. When I got my tomato alley put in, I realized there were several plants, different varieties that I actually hadn't planted yet, and I really wanted to make sure I planted at least one or two of every variety that I grew. So I threw up another row over here, and I think it's gonna work out good. And then behind me along the fence, I have a couple different varieties of cucumbers and pole beans, climbing beans, that will grow up on the fence. So here's one of the Chernobyl tomatoes. I've got Hungarian hearts, Jersey devils, a couple different ones. They're all pretty small still. And then you can see my cucumbers are coming up, and I always put two seeds in every hole just in case one doesn't grow. And they always both come up. So I will be thinning those out soon. And I believe here we have purple potted pole beans, if I am not mistaken. That's what are here, or they might have been the scarlet runner beans. Either way, I believe it was a purple kind of bean that I put along this area. And what is a garden without a compost pile? We got a new addition this spring. We have 6 roan ducks just starting to get their feathers. It's the end of the day, so their pool and yard space has gotten mucky. I've heard that people say ducks are pretty dirty, and it's true. They are pretty dirty. We have to clean out their pool every single day, and we alternate the yard space that we keep them in. Eventually they will go out with the chickens. Probably another couple weeks. We're just waiting for their feathers to come in more, and then we're gonna move them out and integrate them with the rest of the chickens and see how that goes. And that about wraps it up for this garden tour, the first one of 2022 in my garden here, Zone 6A in Northeast Ohio. Gardening has been such a joy, and I am so pleased that I am able to share it with you all. If you have enjoyed this garden tour, please let me know in a comment below, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'll be doing more garden tours throughout the season, and I'm very excited to just share with you how everything turns out and how it grows. And I'd love to hear from you. What are you growing in your gardens this year? You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, where I put a post more regularly, and also TikTok at Lex in the Garden. I wish you all a wonderful gardening season, and please remember to do something you love today. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.